Well, in the Middle East, Israel's launched a new offensive in southern Lebanon tonight after a day in battles in which 40 Hezbollah fighters and 15 Israeli soldiers were killed. That's Israel's heaviest loss so far. Earlier, Israel voted to step up the ground war in Lebanon. Hezbollah says the south will become a graveyard for Zionists. In a moment, our diplomatic editor Mark Urban on the fading prospects of a ceasefire. But first, we're joined from Jerusalem by our correspondent Crispin Thorold. Crispin, what news of the latest military action by Israel?
Well, Martha, there have been dramatic pictures on Israeli television of armoured columns crossing into Lebanon, being covered by Israeli artillery fire. Now, there's obviously a lot of people in Jerusalem who are sitting here anticipating a broader ground offensive, but the Israeli Defense Forces have been very clear. They say this is part of their normal operations. They're going into an area called Al-Qaim, that's just north of Metula and Kiryat Shimona, both places we've heard a lot about in the past few days because there have been a lot of Hezbollah rockets launched into, and the Israelis believe that a lot of them came from Al-Qaim, so that's why they're going into that area at the moment. But they stress this isn't broad just yet. We've also had reports on Channel 10, an Israeli channel here, that members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard have been found, dead members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard have been found with Hezbollah fighters by the Israeli army. Again, we've not had confirmation of that. And one other point that should be made is that with reports that 15 Israeli soldiers were killed during the fighting during the course of the day. And if that is confirmed by the Israeli army, that will be the largest number of Israeli soldiers to die in a single day in this conflict.
Crispin, thank you very much for the latest news on the ground. Now, for a broader picture of all that, here's our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban.
The struggle for a UN resolution to end the Lebanese war goes on, but tonight it's floundering as the belligerents harden their positions. The White House has decamped to the president's ranch in Texas, from where concern at this turn of events was voiced this evening.
It's beyond any of us to come up with a firm prediction about when you get a resolution. Our view is you have to have a resolution that offers a solution.
Israeli ministers, meeting in their war cabinet today, approved a push towards the Litani River, a substantial advance into Lebanon, although they say it won't start for a couple of days. The decision puts pressure on the diplomacy and potentially adds weeks to the Israeli operations.
In the absence of concrete action out of New York, obviously Israel can't sit by idly and continue to see its cities bombarded by these barrage after barrage of Hezbollah rockets. I think we are acting to defend our citizens, to clean out South Lebanon from that Hezbollah presence that is launching the rockets. And that operation is ongoing as we wait for concrete steps out of New York.
The draft resolution agreed at the weekend talked about the immediate cessation by Hezbollah of all attacks and by Israel of all offensive military operations, allowing the Israelis to continue operating in self-defense, and a clause stating strict respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Israel and Lebanon avoided any explicit call on Israel to withdraw from areas of Lebanon occupied during the recent fighting.
With great effort, the Lebanese government introduced its 7-point plan, but the Americans and the French ignored it in the plan they introduced to the Security Council. The least we can describe this draft resolution is as unfair and unjust. It has given Israel more than it wanted and more than it was looking for. At every turn, the response to the 7-point plan and the Lebanese demands have been ignored.
Attempts by an American negotiator visiting Beirut today to reconcile Lebanon to the UN draft failed, and the Lebanese are now working away at something deeper than the phrasing of the ceasefire terms, questioning whether an international force with a strong mandate is needed.
Any idea of an international force being mandated in some way as to become much more of an independent force, not under the direct authority of the United Nations, would be for the Lebanese government unacceptable, because it could be then described or seen as an occupying force, as a foreign occupying force, and that would open up all kinds of possibilities and scenarios that we've had in the past in Lebanon.
With Lebanon now raising its diplomatic price for agreeing to the resolution, Israeli operations are continuing in the south of the country. And despite the loss of 15 Israeli soldiers there today, the Israeli public still supports the campaign.
What's interesting about this conflict, which has been going on almost for a month now, is the wall-to-wall support the government is getting from right through to left. The understanding that Hezbollah is a strategic threat to this country, that there's no reason for the continued existence of that Hezbollah military force in Lebanon, and that the removal of that Iranian proxy in Lebanon can in fact do much to stabilize the northern frontier and even lead to a situation where Israel and Lebanon can have a more peaceful relationship.
One of the mysteries in this diplomatic unravelling is what happened to the vaunted French role in representing Lebanon's concerns at the UN. Why should a formula acceptable to France on Saturday now seems so objectionable to Lebanon? The next couple of days will tell us whether this happened as a negotiating tactic or whether Lebanon has decided that Arab and world opinion will support it, taking the search for a solution back several stages.
Diplomats at the UN haven't given up, but tonight Downing Street is expressing its concern that no resolution has been passed yet, and emphasising that one revised to meet Lebanon's concerns about the international force would be acceptable. To that extent, Lebanon's attempts to shape the diplomacy have already borne fruit.